Okay, welcome everybody to this Adversity to Advantage podcast. My name's Kevin Farrell and I work for an organisation called TPAS. With a leading tenant engagement organisation in England. I've got with me today Maureen, Nicky and Chris, who have been active tenant activists and involved in various groups with Connect for quite some time. And we're going to be discussing really the sort of how the residents' voice can be heard, listened to and acted on. So I'm going to ask each of you to just say a little bit about yourselves and the kind of things that you've been involved in, and then we'll have a chat about hearing the residents' voice. So maybe if we could start with you, Maureen.
Yes, Maureen Kershaw. I've been a tenant of Connect for 19 years, and the last 14 years have been active with tenant involvement. Through the CRF, I was secretary and treasurer of the CRF, but of course there was so much more than just that, because that led us into sitting in board meetings, becoming a board observer and going on away days.
All sorts of activities and involvement, isn't it, really, in
yes,
shaping,
that's right, yes.
Connect services.
Yeah, because one group seemed to lead into another, and of course it just never stops because we're always learning.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, is at the point about learning from each other, both the organisation learning from you and you learning from the organisation. It's a two-way street, isn't it?
That's right, it is.
And I think that learning can help everybody involved. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that residents have a lot of knowledge, don't they, about the services they receive, about where they live.
Well, that's right, because we are the eyes and ears. We see what's going on a day-to-day basis. It's happening all the time, whether it's good, bad, indifferent.
Yeah, it's not 9 to 5. It's your lives, it's your lived experience, it's your homes.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're seeing things all the time.
We are.
So that even though services might shut down, you carry on. It's your life, it's where you live, and you're picking things up all the time, aren't you? So again, your voice being heard about those kind of times of the week and the night and the day when maybe Connect services aren't around is really, really important. What's it like at the weekend? What's it like in the evenings? I mean, that's what Connect needs to know that, doesn't it? You know.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. In fact, sometimes when you ring up Connect, and then you see your name and you think, they'll be thinking, oh crikey, here she is again. What this time? But of course, when tenants, your neighbours, other residents are not prepared to come forward themselves.
Yes.
That is the problem. Yeah. And so it is left to those of us who can speak and be the voice of tenants. Because we may have the same gripes as the others, but it's us that are the ones that are stepping forward.
Yeah.
For many reasons, a lot of people feel that they can't speak for themselves, so that's where we come in. To as a go-between, really.
That's right.
Interesting. I'll stop there and thank you for that, Maureen, and we'll come back to a number of those things, I'm sure, as we're chatting. But just ask Nicky, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your involvement.
Yeah, I'm Nicky. I've been a tenant for nearly 10 years of Connect. I've been on various groups within Connect for nearly 10 years. I'm on SIF. I also do scrutiny. As like Maureen, I was a CRF member for quite a few years, and also a board observer as well. I think it's important that we do these rules for tenants, to speak up for tenants that haven't got a voice, that feel they can't speak for themselves. Like Maureen said, we're the ears, we're the eyes of the tenants, we're the ears and eyes of Connect, and we should be joining together to bring about change if there's needed change, bringing about resolutions where there's resolutions being made that need to be made. I feel Connect very much do work with tenants, and I think that's good, because a lot of housing associations don't have the same things as we get. you know?
So you've both touched upon this really important point about being an advocate in your communities for maybe people who, for whatever reason, don't feel as if they
Yeah.
can speak up.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important point to acknowledge that some people don't have the confidence to articulate how they're feeling,
No.
but certain people within community may be able to take on that role for them and
That's
speak
it, yeah.
for them.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think some people, you know, they think, oh, well, if I speak up, I might lose my property.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it's as bad as that.
Yeah. Yes.
It can really scare people.
It
The
can.
thought of what might happen if they speak
Yeah.
out.
And sometimes there can be complacency as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whereas they just sit back and think that somebody else is going to do it for them.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Whereas where we come in and we will do it for them, you know.
Yeah. So there are a number of factors in play here, potentially, aren't there? There's a fear factor, potentially. There's maybe some complacency.
There's age factor.
Age factors,
There's disability
Yeah.
factor,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
There's, as I say, there's people that are dyslexic, that can't actually use a form
Yeah.
or can't use the phone.
Yeah.
You know, so there's lots of different reasons that they won't get in touch with Connect, but that's where we come in.
So I think the message for staff and Connect is to be aware of those things, to have that insight, that understanding of people's needs. It's about actually being able to identify where the barriers might be, where the blockages might be, where the reasons are why people don't want to talk up or speak up. But I'll turn to Chris now and just ask you, Chris, to say hi. Just tell us about your involvement.
Hello, I'm Chris Sharp from Hetman-Wyke. Been a tenant for 10 years and been involved with Connect resident activities for nearly 10 years. First with CRF and then SIF and scrutiny panel. We've had like away days. We did archery once, didn't we? And CRF meetings with craft meetings, weren't they? Like doing crafts.
So it was the social aspect
Yeah.
of it as
There's a
well.
social
Was
aspects
that
as well.
brought
Yeah.
tenants together.
It
Yeah.
did bring tenants
Yeah.
together,
Yes.
yeah.
And sometimes those social activities can be another good way of listening and hearing voices,
That's
can't
right.
they?
Well, they can.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, I think, you know from what Chris was saying,
Yeah.
through the CRF, when we had those general meetings, the tenants would come along and say, oh, yes, I'll come to that. And you mentioned something about, we might have a speaker on repairs. Well, they'll fill the place out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they won't pick up the phone necessarily or contact Connect themselves, but in the safety of numbers at the CRF meetings,
Yes.
they would come along.
Yeah.
And so, as Chris says, you know, you might be enticing them along with having a social event, but things would come out, which was good because we did hear their voice.
Yeah.
It was an informal meeting, wasn't it?
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
So
And
something about
sometimes you need that.
informality as well,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
people perhaps are more relaxed and more likely
Yeah.
to open up if it's an informal setting. I've worked with you a lot, haven't I, Chris, over the last sort of 8 years,
Yeah.
and I think upon things like the away days and the meetings we attend, I think it's very important that they're well supported by Connect staff, and I think we can say that Connect have always fielded the right managers,
Yeah.
that the managers are accountable to you, that staff are accountable to you, they'll come and talk to you, they'll explain things to you, and that access to them is really important, I think,
I
isn't
also like the fact that in SIF we get a board member come to SIF, you know, and I think that's important because that's bridging the gap between us and the board.
And what do you think happens as a result of that board member attending?
I think that it's opening their eyes a bit to what the tenants want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what we feel. They can then take it back to the board, you know,
Yeah.
with a bit more insight into things.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So we've talked about that resident voice in the boardroom, haven't we? And how those board members that do attend are committed to going back to board and explaining your views on things. And I think recently we've talked a lot, haven't we, about how you then want the feedback from board, don't you? You want to hear what board's thinking about what you think, what you say. And I know you're working on that at the moment with the board, and there's a commitment for the board to come back and talk to you. So resident voice in the seat of power, really, isn't it? I just wanted to sort of introduce that kind of concept of what you're doing more and more of, which is you're asking Connect to demonstrate to you how they're listening to tenants, aren't you?
That's what we're getting at the moment. We're getting more information now than what we've ever had, especially through the scrutiny.
And I think what we're trying to look at all the time now is you're saying to Connect, aren't you? What are people saying about that, and how do you know? And what we've seen, I think, starting to emerge is a lot more survey work by Connect.
Yeah.
And I think you started to see a much clearer picture on complaints, on the kind of low-level complaints.
And I think that's important that we do that, and that Connect also recognise that there's these low-level complaints as well as the big complaints.
Yes.
And I think with the surveys that they're doing, they're getting the feedback now of that.
And that's helping you, isn't it? There's always, I suppose, the danger that if you're 6 or 8 tenants in a room, you can only represent or give so much information, and what you're getting, I guess, from this information now is a much broader picture of what.
Because we're only a few. We're only a few.
Yeah.
But what they're getting now is more tenants voicing their voices, which is good.
Yes.
Because before it was just us few. What I get out of it is knowing that I'm making some sort of difference in the area where I live, And when I came to Connect, I didn't have nothing. And I feel now that I'm quite proud of my property. I'm quite proud of the area I live, and Connect helped me out when I needed it. So, I'm quite proud of Connect.
Yes.
In the way that they are,
Good.
and the way they act with their tenants as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't always feel listened to, I must admit. But majority of the time, now we are.
Yeah.
Before, you just rented a house and that was it, know. But now, I know a lot more. I've learnt a lot more.
I think as people become more involved, you do need that overview, don't you? I think we've certainly seen that through scrutiny, haven't we? As we've looked at things in more detail, you've really begun to understand.
I really enjoyed scrutiny, doing scrutiny. I really enjoy that. And I enjoy the SIF as well, because we can improve services through SIF. Which is good.
Yeah. And what was particularly enjoyable about scrutiny? You said you really enjoyed that.
Just delving into things, getting to the nitty-gritty of things.
Exactly, that's just what I was going to say, down to the nitty-gritty.
I think one of the features of scrutiny is you have more time, don't you, to look at things. You spend quite a lot of time on scrutiny. You can spend 3, sometimes 6 months, can't you? And it's that thing where you're actually sort of taking it over a longer period of time and taking a more measured look, and as you say, really delving into it, taking a deep dive into how things work. Because sometimes it's not easy to give a snap answer, is it, or a snap reply to something in the confines of perhaps a 2-hour meeting. Being asked to just give a reaction or a response to something can be quite difficult, can't it? And even within those meetings, you might be only having maybe 10 minutes on a particular item. So I think with scrutiny, what you've had a chance to do is stand back, take your time and really look at something closely, haven't you? What about working with staff on scrutiny? What's that been like?
Very good. I mean, in the early days of it, of course, we were, it was scrutiny, not as we know it now particularly, but other exercises that we were doing with staff pre-COVID. We would do a lot of observing within the offices, and it was good. And it was good anyway to just be able to put faces to names, and you came away and you thought, you really felt part of the organisation.
Okay. Because I saw you building relationships. I saw you building really good relationships, as you say, on a sort of really human level, didn't you? And I also, what I noticed about that process was that it didn't need to be a recommendation in a report for things to start happening. That if you often chat with people, they tell you about an issue, you'd look at it together collaboratively, and you'd say, do you know what, there's a fix here we could help you with, or we could certainly suggest something, and that fix would often come about quite quickly.
I know Chris enjoyed it, didn't you? The first scrutiny we did.
Yeah.
What was it? Was the
repairs, wasn't it?
Yeah, you enjoyed that. The telephones, didn't you?
You got a chance to sit and listen on the phones, is that right, Chris?
Yeah, I think we interviewed staff, didn't we, in the telephone answering repairs.
So you were hearing the kind of their stories and,
Yeah.
and some of the challenges they were up against, yeah?
Yeah.
But the
Okay.
subject of repairs never goes away,
No.
It doesn't.
does it?
It's always
So it's always
No,
there. But
it's still there.
if I can just pick up on what you said,
Please do, Maureen.
Kevin, about collaborative.
Yes.
A few years ago, we formed the Leeds Collaborative Group, and that was some engaged tenants from Connect, and I think there were about 4 or 5 other organisations, and we mirrored the chief execs that belong to the Leeds Alliance Group. So they met on a frequent basis to, have a good old chin wag and whatever they discussed. We concentrated on best practice.
Okay.
Now that was a really good insight into how other housing associations were working.
Okay, yeah.
Because it wasn't just a matter of going and having our offices at our meetings rather at the other offices,
Yeah.
but we would arrange to go out, we'd concentrate
Okay,
on various
okay.
things. So we did a thing on kitchen replacements, and we arranged with our organisations to, see how they worked, what was planned, any recent installations and replacements, could we go along?
Yeah.
And we'd get in a minibus and we'd go round to see them. Now, the good thing was that Connect won on most of the things.
Okay.
Kitchen replacements particularly,
Okay.
everyone was so
Okay.
impressed.
Okay.
They fed back
Yeah.
to Leeds Fed and wherever about how good they thought Connect were. And we fed back about how good the gardening was
Okay.
at other housing
okay.
associations.
Okay.
Whereas so ours
Yeah.
was slipping. It wasn't that we were tops in everything,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it was good
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
that best
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah. So being able to
exercise.
compare landlords.
Exactly.
You found really
Yeah.
useful. And there's something about the resident's voice not just being about the resident's voice within Connect, but it's actually sometimes about joining up with residents in the city area or
That's
the regional
right.
area. By the sounds of things, it also gave you confidence in Connect to think they're doing a good job.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
And we were only
yeah.
too delighted to be able to report back to
Yeah.
board
Yes.
and say, yes, you're doing it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are impressed. And of course, the other organisations within the Collab group, they were very impressed that Connect invited members of the CRF committee
Yeah.
to become board observers
Yes.
because they couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
others, say, what, you go to board meetings?
Yeah, yeah. So you're spreading good practice. You're being,
Exactly.
being a beacon of good practice
Yeah.
for
Yes.
organisations to
Yeah.
learn from. Okay, that's great. Just want to move on now to some thoughts about barriers to engagement, being involved, barriers to having voices heard. From your experience, what are the kind of things, I think we touched on it in your introduction, but what are the kind of barriers you think stand in the way for people, and how could you encourage more people to have their say, do you think?
I think work can be a barrier to some people as they're at work and then they don't want to come home and go through paperwork, and
Yeah.
most of the meetings are during the day, aren't they?
Yeah.
We attend.
I think that's a really good point, Chris. I think that lifestyles can certainly be
Yes.
a real issue, can't it? Whatever your lifestyle might be, there will be barriers within that around your time, your availability, your ability to communicate. I mean, I think we've seen a small revolution during the pandemic to switching to things like Zoom and Teams. And I know we all have met on, certainly during the pandemic we met, didn't we?
Yeah, we
on
did.
Teams. So I think technology seems to me to offer some help to people who might want to, and certainly, in my work, I work quite often in the evenings on Zoom and Team. People tend to find that a lot easier in terms of having to go after the kids, as you say, Chris, coming from work, and they're quite prepared to give that time, perhaps. So there's something here about when, where, how Connect communicate with people and how they give people the ability to communicate with them.
Yeah.
But it's also that recognition about busy lifestyles. People have got other things going on in their lives. So how do Connect, I guess, make it easy for people?
That's right. I mean, we've tried it all through the CRF.
Yeah.
We'd have so many evening meetings. because we think, oh well, you know, we've got to. If the people are at work during the day, let's have so many evening meetings. But then it was the same people turning up anyway.
Okay.
So we thought, right, well, we're going to have to go down another road and try and encourage them to come along. But I do think that it's a fear of the unknown with a lot of tenants. They probably like the idea of having that opportunity to, you know, have their say, but they're a little bit apprehensive of how much time is going to be involved. What is expected of them? I think it is that fear of the unknown.
Interesting.
Yes, because when we had one of the early exercises that we did, I think it was when we were drawing up the estate management checklist. Yeah. And we had some interested residents then. And as soon as we sort of said, no, it'll be held at the offices and that, it's, ooh, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's very, very difficult, I think, trying to get new people on board.
This is where a lot of technology can come into it, though, as
That's
well.
right, yeah.
Because they don't have to go into an office.
Yes.
They can sit at home of an evening with their coffee or whatever, their drink, and just sit on a computer or a laptop and join in with different subjects, you know?
Yeah, big learning point, it seems to me, here is what you're saying is Connect needs to be able to paint a picture of what it's going to be like to be involved.
Yes.
And it's those things like, I think what you call like stepping over thresholds, isn't it? When I walk into a room, when I walk into a building, what's it going to be like? Who'll greet me? Who's going to be there? What will we be doing? So I know, I've certainly watched clips from different organisations where they've literally filmed activities and said, this is what we do, this is what it's like. Here are some of the people that get involved. You know, this is what you can expect when you arrive.
Like a little introduction before.
A little introduction,
that's good.
And I think verbally, if staff are encouraging people to get involved, they should come with that information, shouldn't they? You know, this is where it will be. This is who you'll meet. This is how long it takes. You know, this is what we'll kind of be discussing. Perhaps your tip there is that Connect can go further in terms of actually putting people at the ease and actually telling them what it's about and what it will feel like. Yeah.
I do think it helped when we had these events away from Connect. Well, we had them at various places, didn't we? The old fire station and one thing and another. I can't remember exactly what it was all about now. Many things.
Woodkirk Valley Country Club, we went there.
Yes, but I think in that setting we got a lot of people, well over 100 people came along. Yeah. And then when you sort of broke it down and we spoke to them and said in small groups, and do you think you might be involved then? You'd like to be involved? Oh yes, and they put the names down. But I think personally there was too much of a delay between those gatherings of tenants and actually inviting them along to come to something. And I think you've got to strike while the iron's hot. If you're having an event and trying to appeal to tenants, get them on board, you've got to go back to them. Sort of, you know, like we met you at the event last week. Do you still wish to be involved?
Yes.
Can we let anything else that you'd like to know? I think you've got to keep the impetus up
that momentum
at the time. It's no good leaving it until weeks or months down the line.
Really good
because life's moved on. They've moved on. They're on to other things. They've probably even forgotten that they've been to it.
So there's a tip there around quick follow-up.
Yes,
and actually
definitely.
Planning whatever you're doing. If you're planning engagements, don't just plan for the event, but be planning for what comes after the event and what the next step is.
That's it, Kevin.
Good
I think that is
really good point.
vital. And this is what I would like to see Connect do.
Yeah. Thank you.
Keep the interest there.
Keep the interest while it's alive. And,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, maybe we can move on then to talk about positive change that you've seen, where you've heard the residents' voice make a positive change. Perhaps maybe the best way to talk about this is just think about some of the projects, the scrutiny projects. Do you think about the expressions of dissatisfaction piece of work you've just finished for scrutiny? What were the positive changes there, do you think, in terms of that project? Because, I mean, you looked at it, you found that the process wasn't working as well as you thought it was. No. You discovered that it really hadn't been embedded as much. I think you discovered that staff didn't feel as well trained or familiar with the process as they should be.
Well, before, it wasn't fit for purpose.
Okay.
To be honest with you. But now, you know, it's getting a lot better. And I think we have made a change there. And I think through scrutiny, I think we've made a lot of changes, really.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it does go to board and it does go to the RMCA.
Yeah.
And I think that with all that, we have seen we've been told some of the changes that have happened.
Yes.
Because we get a scoring matrix of what's been done, what hasn't been done.
Yes.
And most of the scoring matrix is positive.
Yeah.
So I feel that we have made a change.
Yeah.
And I feel that Connect are now trying to connect with the residents more.
Yes. So you're talking about, kind of action plans, aren't you? And this is something that perhaps tenants who are very involved, like yourselves, will get to that point where you'll be monitoring action plans, you'll be checking that things have been implemented. How good do you think Connect are at then telling the wider resident body of what you've done and what changes have been made? Do you think they need to improve that in any way?
Yes, definitely. I don't think, I mean, how it will be done, I don't really know, but I don't think it's sufficient just to wait until the next issue of the magazine, because we know that a lot of tenants don't even read the magazine.
Okay.
And that's just, that's just how people are. That's their choice.
People.
I think there are certainly things that could be improved in feeding back to
broadcasting, perhaps broadcasting success stories, broadcasting the fact that change is happening, that people are being listened to. Absolutely.
But not only just on the internet, because not everybody does internet.
Sure.
You know,
sure.
So a lot of older people in our scheme that wouldn't even know how to do internet.
No, sure.
You know?
So you've got to find different channels.
So there needs to be different channels to do it in.
Yeah. Chris, any thoughts from you on positives you've seen?
Yeah, it's highlighted things that have not come through, like we did with the gardening. I think there was a gold standard, a silver standard and a bronze standard, and we highlighted that we were getting a sort of a silver standard service from the gardener at the time.
You really influenced that. I saw you really influenced that. You really understood that, didn't you? You really picked it apart and tried to understand what the different standards did, whether in fact Connect was reaching those standards, and whether or not I think in one sense you felt as if it kind of looked good on paper, didn't you? You said like, presentationally it looks nice. But I think what you wanted to do is get behind that and say, well, what does it actually mean in real terms? What does it mean to us as service users? And I saw, as you say, a real positive from that and I think you are sometimes, and very often I think, able to reinforce Connect staff, aren't you? And say, yes, you're doing the right thing. Yes, you're on track. Yes, we like what you're doing. And actually, going back to that really important point, we've also got evidence to say that a wider group of residents are saying the same thing. And I know, it's also, isn't it, sometimes you having direct conversations and trying to go out and talk to tenants as well, isn't it? And say to them, what's your experience? What do you think of particular things? And I know you've looked at commissioning your own surveys, haven't you? Because you've learnt that you talking to another tenant is often more powerful. They don't feel they're any longer talking to an authority like Connect. They feel as if they're talking to people like them. And I think, again, we've seen some benefits from you surveying and talking to tenants, haven't we, directly? They're more likely perhaps to open up to you. And it goes back to your original point about people being fearful of talking to authority, doesn't it?
But even staff can be fearful talking to us sometimes, and we have to break that barrier down as well. That we're not always going to be negative, you know?
No.
We do bring a lot of positive stuff as well.
Absolutely.
And we can be positive about their work as well, you know?
Yeah.
It's not always negative, and we're not here to be negative.
No.
We're here to connect with Connect and just help them to see what the tenant wants,
Yes.
to see how they're working with the tenants.
Yes.
You know? And sometimes you can be positive. You can say, right, this is working.
Yeah.
You know, we feel this has worked really well.
Yeah.
The tenants have told us this,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
I mean, last week we had a problem with the gardening, and we brought it up, and that was remedied, you know, and the tenants were quite pleased that it was remedied, because they were all very negative about it. But then, they do a lovely job. They've done a really good job, you know. So that's a positive thing from the tenants.
Yeah.
You know, but we brought that up.
Yeah.
You know, and then they thought, right, you know, we got to do something about this, and it was done.
Yes, it was acted upon very quickly.
It was acted on very quickly.
Yeah. So that was an example of you representing the voice of where you lived, putting that across very, to senior managers, and then senior managers acting upon it very quickly. But I think you make a really good point, Nicky, and I think it's one that staff will appreciate, which is that this is not about being critical of everything Connect does. Far from it. It's actually about recognising the really good work that Connect does. It's about the times to pat people on the back and say, job really well done.
Yes.
And then you're not looking to trip people up or criticise the organisation.
No.
You're trying to be constructive, trying to help.
Right.
That's right.
Trying. And I think one of the things I've observed you all do over many years is try and look for solutions and fixes, haven't you? I see you saying, not only is there an issue, but we think we know how this might be fixed or sorted out.
And hopefully that helps Connect as well as us.
So it's about working together, isn't it? It's about trying to fix some problems, solve things together, not just sit around and complain. Very much when I work with you, it's about trying to come up with solutions, not just sit, woe is me, isn't everything terrible, but what actually can we do to try and
what
fix
can
this?
we do,
Yeah.
And how we can work together.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think, you're touching also on that point about the speed. Speed seems to be an issue that's coming up here. That it's the speed of response that matters. You want to see quick reactions when people have said they're interested in something.
Yes.
So perhaps we're sensing that Connect needs to up its game a little bit.
Yeah.
Catching things while they're on fire and running with them, rather than perhaps delaying things. So perhaps there's a learning point there for the organisation.
Yes.
Just want to move on to maybe a couple of last points then. Just a point really about what you think Connect could do to increase the resident voice. We've talked about, now that a regular survey goes out asking for people's perceptions of Connect, which is a very interesting idea. The idea that you're just asking, what do you feel about Connect? What do you think about the services you're receiving? You've explored in great detail the expressions of dissatisfaction. You regularly look at complaints and complaints data, and actually you're allowed to, without seeing names and addresses, see the kind of what people are actually saying. And there are a variety of ways, there's a menu of ways in which people can get involved. Is there anything else you think that needs to be done to sort of increase the residents' voice, to turn up the volume on the residents' voice?
We need to speak to people face to face.
Okay. Okay.
Some sort of event that's not going to cost the earth.
Right. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
That we can, because now we don't have a CRF, and most of them were older people anyway.
Yeah.
We need the younger voices.
Yes.
They would attend an event.
Okay.
And I think that is what we could do with not just about tenant involvement.
Yeah, I know we did have an event that was originally lined up on a Saturday, wasn't there? Where there was going to be a general sort of listening exercise and leads, wasn't there? Right?
The Park Plaza.
Yes.
I think it's quite
and
good.
you get a number of people turning up to those.
Yeah.
And of varying ages, which is what you want.
We want
and
different
people
ages.
are not afraid to speak out then. And that is a way, I think. But of course I know it's down to cost.
Yes, yeah.
I think also
very difficult.
We need voices of the newer tenants that's joined as well, and also the cultural fact as well.
Yeah.
We need to take every culture into consideration.
Yeah.
If we do an event,
So the secret here perhaps is that you need to talk to people, as Maureen said, face to face, find out what they need, what they want, how they like to communicate. I'm going to have to wrap us up here. It's been a fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you about these things. It's been great working with you for all these years. And I've seen, and we've all seen together, haven't we, the way we can make changes, improve this influence, to use Chris's word, and how residents' voices are being heard in Connect. And you've given some really helpful tips there, I think, on ways in which it could improve even more. So I'd just like to thank you, Maureen, Nicky and Chris, for your time this morning. And I look forward to working with you in the future to influence and change and make even more improvements to Connect.
And we thank Connect for having the privilege of having us as tenants and residents on different groups.
Thank you all. Thank you.